Have you ever felt completely invisible, like no one sees your strength or your worth? Imagine sitting quietly on a plane, exhausted from a lifetime of proving yourself, when suddenly a voice over the intercom shakes the cabin to its core. Any fighter pilot on board, the air turns tense, eyes dart around, and every heartbeat feels amplified. In that moment, one choice could change everything: step forward or remain in the shadows. Could you summon the courage to act when everyone's life depends on it? Could you face fear and uncertainty while staying true to yourself? Picture yourself there, your mind racing. Strangers looking to you for guidance, the weight of responsibility pressing down, and the knowledge that hesitation could cost lives. What would you do? How would you react if the world suddenly demanded your strength, your skill, and your calm under pressure? This isn't just a story of action or heroism. It's a story about courage, empathy, and the quiet power we carry within us. Join us as we follow Alicia Carter's journey, a woman who slept on a flight until fate called her to rise, experience her struggle, her choices, and the lessons that could change how you see yourself. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to follow this incredible story. The cabin lights dimmed as United Airlines Flight 739 prepared for takeoff from Chicago O'Hare International Airport. Outside the window, snowflakes drifted in lazy spirals, melting the second they touched the glass. Inside, the hum of conversation mixed with the occasional beep from a passenger adjusting a seatbelt. It was just another evening flight bound for San Francisco, tucked away in seat 23C. Alicia Carter tilted her head back, pulled the hood of her gray sweatshirt over her curls, and closed her eyes. To most people, she looked like any tired traveler, maybe a mother flying back from a long trip, or someone escaping another weary day of work. What no one noticed or cared to ask was who she really was. She folded her arms, her posture small, her breathing steady, as though she was determined to disappear into the background. Years of practice had taught her how, across the aisle, a woman in a tailored navy blazer leaned toward her companion and whispered, not quite softly enough. Figures, hoodie, sneakers, no carry-on, probably just another low-level employee flying cheap. Her companion chuckled. Definitely not management material. The words floated past Alicia like smoke. She had learned long ago not to flinch when strangers judged her by a hoodie, by her skin, by her silence. But there was always that familiar sting, the echo of years when she had fought harder than most, only to be doubted twice as often. The flight attendants moved briskly down the aisle, checking seat belts. A boy, no older than 12, with bright brown eyes and a restless energy, tapped his mother's arm in the row ahead. "Mom, when do we get snacks?" His mother smiled, brushing a curl from his forehead. "Not yet, Ethan. First, we fly." The boy Ethan Brooks glanced around curiously, his gaze landing for a moment on Alicia. For reasons he couldn't explain, he watched her a little longer. There was something calm about the way she breathed, even in a cabin full of chatter and fidgeting. The captain's voice broke through the speakers, confident and warm. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain William Harris. We'll be departing shortly, heading west toward San Francisco. Flight time will be approximately 4 hours. Weather along the way looks clear, though we may encounter some turbulence over the Rockies. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight." A polite ripple of clapping followed, a few jokes about turbulence tossed between strangers. The engines roared, the aircraft tilted upward, and Chicago's skyline melted into the night. Alicia shifted slightly, letting the vibration of the climb rock her into drowsiness. Sleep came easily on planes here, among strangers. She could escape her thoughts. For once, no one expected her to lead, to prove, to defend. She was just another body in the crowd. Her mind slipped backward anyway, toward the past she tried to bury. She saw flashes of cockpit bathed in red warning lights, voices shouting coordinates, the gut-wrenching sound of an explosion that should never have happened. The memory jolted her awake, her hand clutching the armrest until her knuckles ached. She forced herself to breathe in and out, whispering silently, "Not now. Not here." Rows ahead. Robert Miller adjusted his jacket and gave a quick glance around. A former police officer. He still carried himself with the watchful air of someone trained to scan for trouble. His eyes landed briefly on Alicia, then moved on. Something about her posture, tight shoulders, controlled breath caught his attention, but he dismissed it. People carried all sorts of stories on planes. It wasn't his business. At the front of the cabin, Kate Reynolds tapped furiously at her phone before the signal cut off. She sighed, muttering, 4 hours without Wi-Fi. Fantastic. How am I supposed to manage 2 deals from the sky? Her neighbor chuckled politely, but Kate didn't notice. She was too busy scrolling through notes, irritated by every small delay. The plane leveled at cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Attendants wheeled out carts, clinking soda cans and crinkling pretzel bags. Laughter bubbled up from one row where a group of college students compared playlists. For a moment, the flight felt utterly ordinary. And in the middle of it all, Alicia slept, or at least she pretended to. Behind her closed eyes, her heart kept its measured rhythm, and her ears caught fragments of voices. Business in San Francisco visiting family. First time on this airline. Ordinary lives unfolding in ordinary ways. The kind of normalcy she both longed for and never truly believed she deserved. She shifted, feeling the weight of the years pressing on her chest. She remembered headlines, whispers in boardrooms, the quiet but sharp edge of doubt whenever she walked into a room as the only black woman, the only former fighter pilot, the only one who had to explain, justify, over and over. No one on Flight 739 saw any of that. They just saw someone napping, and that was fine. That was safer. Half an hour into the flight, the hum of engines smoothed into white noise. The Rocky Mountains still lay far ahead. Conversations dwindled, replaced by the shuffle of magazines and the glow of seatback screens. And in 23C, Alicia Carter slept on. No one noticed her. No one cared. Not yet. The cabin of Flight 739 had settled into a rhythm. Passengers adjusted to the gentle hum of the engines, the soft vibration against the floor, the occasional flicker of overhead reading lights. Kate Reynolds finally tucked her phone away, letting out a long sigh as she leaned back against the window. Her mind wandered from emails to contracts to the sheer absurdity of sitting trapped inside a metal tube, 4 hours suspended between cities. Across the aisle, Robert Miller, now slightly more relaxed, scanned the cabin casually, noting the passengers around him. A mother fussing with her toddler, an elderly couple holding hands tightly, a group of college students debating loudly over a trivia game, and then there was Alicia Carter, still seated in 23C, her gray hoodie drawn low, the faint rise and fall of her chest steady, almost unnervingly so. There was a stillness about her that didn't quite belong, not the kind of relaxation that comes with sleep. It was more a quiet readiness, a tension held in check, like a coiled spring waiting for the signal to release. Ethan Brooks nudged his mother again, whispering, "Mom, why is she sleeping like that? She looks different." Sarah Brooks smiled, brushing back her son's hair. "Just tired, honey. People have different ways of resting." But Ethan didn't look convinced. There was a subtle sharpness in Alicia's posture that drew his eyes, something almost imperceptible yet profoundly human. It wasn't just her quietness, it was the way her hands rested over her lap, the way her feet were planted firmly on the floor. She seemed aware of everything, but not yet reacting. The flight attendants moved quietly down the aisle, offering drinks, adjusting trays, smiling politely. Jennifer Turner, the lead flight attendant, had been trained to notice patterns, anomalies, subtle cues from passengers that might indicate distress. She caught herself glancing toward 23C more than once. There was something about Alicia that tugged at her instincts, though she couldn't name it. A professional intuition whispered, "Pay attention." Meanwhile, Captain William Harris monitored the instruments from the cockpit. The first hour had been uneventful, and he allowed himself a brief moment of reassurance. The snow outside had ended, leaving the lights of cities below twinkling like scattered gems. He could almost forget the tense pre-flight feeling. Almost. The air on the plane shifted subtly as the Rockies drew nearer. The smooth hum of the engines became punctuated with small vibrations. The seatbelt sign flicked back on briefly. Passengers adjusted themselves, some murmuring complaints, some shrugging indifferently. Alicia felt it immediately. Her eyes flicked open just slightly, more observant than asleep, scanning the windows and instruments in her mind. The subtle turbulence wasn't natural. It was mechanical, precise. Someone or something was testing the plane. For now, she stayed still, giving nothing away. Her hands remained tucked into the sleeves of her hoodie. Her breath controlled. Her mind raced, calculating angles, trajectories, and responses, all while maintaining the appearance of a woman merely enduring a flight. Nearby, Robert Miller shifted in his seat. He had worked in law enforcement long enough to sense something off in an ordinary situation. He noticed the subtle movements, the barely perceptible muscle tension in Alicia's shoulders. He leaned slightly, trying not to stare, questioning why his instincts were nudging him toward concern over a stranger. Kate Reynolds, oblivious to the undercurrent, took out her notebook, scribbling business notes in hurried, precise loops. She glanced briefly at Alicia and then quickly averted her eyes, brushing the impression away. A routine flight, she told herself. Nothing to worry about. The hum of conversation and light music in the cabin continued, but there was now a subtle unease. The small noises, the creak of the wings, the occasional thud from the cargo hold, the whispered questions of curious passengers formed a backdrop to Alicia's silent awareness. Her thoughts drifted briefly to her past, to missions she could never discuss publicly. The weight of lives lost, orders questioned, decisions scrutinized. She felt a twinge of guilt, the familiar ache of responsibility. But she reminded herself this was different. This time, she wasn't just reacting to the echoes of old failures. She was preparing, watching, calculating. Suddenly, a noise came from the cargo hold. A sharp, metallic thud echoed through the cabin. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. A flight attendant, trying to maintain calm, announced over the intercom, "Ladies and gentlemen, that was just some cargo shifting. Nothing to worry about. We'll ensure everything is secure." But Alicia's eyes narrowed slightly. That wasn't normal. The timing, the intensity, the reverberation, her mind recognized the signature immediately. It wasn't just a mundane movement. It was a signal, intentional, perhaps a precursor to something larger. Ethan leaned slightly forward, whispering, "Mom." That sounded weird, Sarah Brooks reassured him, but her own pulse quickened. Something about the moment felt different, like the air itself held its breath. Alicia allowed herself a small, measured glance around. She observed the subtle behaviors of those closest to her passengers who reacted instinctively to fear. Flight attendants who masked tension under professional smiles. The quiet vigilance of a man in business, attired 2 rows back. Each movement told her something, a puzzle she began assembling in her mind. The calm of the first hour was over. The ordinary rhythms of the flight had begun to fracture. Alicia Carter, still seated quietly, had already started planning her moves, not yet visible to anyone, not yet acting, but fully awake inside. The plane had been in the air for just over an hour when the first unusual signal appeared on Captain Harris's radar. A flicker, a blip moving with precision unlike any commercial traffic. He leaned closer, squinting at the screen. "Ethan," his co-pilot whispered, "you seeing this?" "No," Harris corrected himself. "Alan." "Sorry, Alan, you're seeing this too." Alan Peterson, calm yet alert, frowned. "Blip at 11 o'clock, 15 miles out, fast. Not a plane we recognize, military maybe, but off schedule." Harris's gut twisted. He had flown for 25 years, through storms, volcanic ash clouds, hijackings, engine failures. Nothing had prepared him for a shadow tracking his plane with surgical precision. In the cabin. Alicia Carter sensed it immediately. Her eyes, hidden behind subtle dark lenses, scanned the windows and the horizon beyond. Her pulse remained steady, but every fiber of her being sharpened. She felt the disturbance in the air before anyone else did, the micro shifts in lift, the unnatural turbulence brushing the wings. Passengers noticed first the subtle vibrations, a jolt here, a whisper of sway there. Drink cups trembled in the tray tables, some spilling a few drops of water. Conversation faltered. Kate Reynolds looked around the cabin, uneasy, her pen hovering mid-note. Jennifer Turner, scanning the aisle, noticed Alicia stir slightly. A subtle shift in posture, the kind that told her something is happening, and she knows. Jennifer's trained instincts whispered, "Pay attention." The thud from the cargo hold returned, louder this time. A hollow metallic sound reverberated, more distinct, more deliberate. The overhead compartments rattled lightly. Flight attendants exchanged nervous glances, but Jennifer stayed composed, masking her concern beneath professional calm. Robert Miller, retired Chicago detective, leaned forward slightly. His instincts screamed something was off, something that didn't belong. He studied Alicia again, noting her micro-adjustments in posture, her steady gaze toward the cockpit, and then the subtle sweep of her eyes toward the windows. He thought he might be imagining it. He wasn't. Alicia's mind raced, running calculations. If the disturbance was intentional, then this wasn't mere turbulence. It wasn't mechanical failure. It was an external factor, calculated, strategic. She allowed herself a deep, quiet breath, maintaining the appearance of a passenger merely enduring minor flight discomfort. Harris tapped the intercom lightly, addressing the passengers with calm authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing minor turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." His voice was warm, steady, but he knew that this turbulence didn't belong to the atmosphere. It belonged to someone or something watching, probing, testing. Alicia adjusted slightly in her seat, sliding her hoodie back over her hands. Her mind flicked through old memories, missions she could never discuss, maneuvers that had once saved lives. The skills had lain dormant, and now, quietly, they began to surface. She wasn't just a passenger. She was the solution. Ethan Brooks shifted nervously, whispering to his mother, "Mom, that plane outside. I think it's close." Sarah Brooks tried to reassure him, but her own pulse quickened. The subtle fear, that tight knot in her stomach, was impossible to ignore. She glanced toward Alicia again, noticing the calm, deliberate precision in her movements. There was something reassuring about her presence, even if she wasn't aware of it. The plane shuddered again, stronger this time. It wasn't violent, but it was precise. A pressure change, almost imperceptible to the average passenger, rippled through the cabin. Alicia's eyes opened fully now, taking in the faint reflection of navigation lights out of alignment. A wake vortex. Someone was mirroring their path, testing them. Jennifer Turner, moving down the aisle, noticed the subtle reaction of Alicia's fingers tucked inside the hoodie sleeves. They twitched, almost imperceptibly, a muscle memory triggered from training long past. Jennifer's gaze followed the subtle shift, her intuition confirming a suspicion she didn't fully understand. Harris called Alan back to the radar. "They're matching our course. Every minor adjustment we make, they mirror it within seconds. Someone's studying us." Alan nodded. "Military, but no identification. Communication attempts unsuccessful. Possibly jamming. If that's the case, we're cut off." In 23C, Alicia allowed herself the first micro-expression of acknowledgement. Not fear, not panic, awareness. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she formulated the steps necessary to maintain control. Every passenger, every crew member, every subtle environmental cue became a data point in her mind. Robert Miller, leaning slightly, recognized the signs of a seasoned operative. He thought she'd seen this before, not knowing her history. He only felt the gravity. Something extraordinary sat quietly among them. The turbulence intensified. Drinks spilled, overhead compartments rattled. A mother clutched her child. A father muttered reassurances he didn't believe. The cabin fell into uneasy silence, punctuated by the hum of engines and the occasional cry of confusion. Alicia's hands rested on her lap, her mind running probabilities. If this was an attack, she would have seconds to act, and she knew precisely how to move. Her internal dialogue wove through past and present: anticipate, observe, control, protect. She glanced at Robert Miller and Kate Reynolds, noting their subtle tension. She understood their fear. She empathized. But she also knew that panic was contagious, and control would become fragile if they succumbed. Alicia Carter allowed herself one final survey of the cabin. Every passenger now unconscious of her deeper awareness, every hand, every glance, every subtle murmur observed without notice. She remained the sleeping woman on the surface, but beneath, the fighter within began to prepare. The first sign of danger was no longer subtle. The air shifted, the vibration increased, the uncertainty became tangible. The stakes had changed, and Alicia Carter, former fighter pilot, CEO, strategist, and survivor, was ready to awaken. Alicia Carter's eyes remained half-closed, maintaining the guise of a tired passenger, but every sense was alert, every neuron primed for action. The hum of the engines, the subtle vibration of the wings, even the low murmur of passengers became part of a symphony she could read like a map. Up ahead in row 38F, a man shifted slightly. He had sat quietly, inconspicuous, hood pulled low over his face. His movements, though subtle, were calculated. His hands clutched a thick tablet that seemed almost too heavy to be mere electronics. The man's eyes flicked briefly toward the cockpit, then back down to his device. Alicia's pulse quickened, not in fear, but in recognition of the signal this man was sending. He was not here by chance. He was carrying something, and someone else had been tracking Flight 739 for hours. She noted the faint tension in his shoulders, the way his knees pressed firmly against the seat in front. Bracing, Jennifer Turner noticed the man's movements too. She approached cautiously, maintaining the professional distance a flight attendant must observe. "Sir," she said, her voice calm, "is everything okay with your device?" The man's head snapped up, eyes wide behind his sunglasses. He didn't answer immediately, as though weighing the risk. Jennifer's instinct screamed that something was amiss. She exchanged a glance with Robert Miller, who had been subtly observing the aisle. His jaw clenched. Years on the force had taught him that appearances were deceptive, and he was sensing danger. Harris's voice came over the intercom again, more tense now. "Flight 739, please remain calm. Minor turbulence expected. Everyone stay in your seats with seat belts fastened." He could feel the tension in the cabin, and he sensed something that no radar blip could fully reveal. Alicia leaned back slightly, observing the man. Micro-adjustments in his posture betrayed unease, and she caught the faint reflection of a digital display on his tablet screen. That small light was a signal, a flare, metaphorical and real. Someone was manipulating more than just data. Someone was testing them. The passengers began noticing more. Drinks jostled, papers slipped, whispers traveled down the aisles. Kate Reynolds gripped the armrest tightly, realizing the turbulence didn't feel natural. Ethan Brooks looked out the window, wide-eyed, searching for explanation, while his mother tried to calm him with reassuring words that sounded hollow even to her own ears. Jennifer returned to her post, keeping the man in sight while maintaining normalcy for the other passengers. She noted the subtle twitch in Alicia's fingers, hidden beneath the oversized hoodie. Something inside the woman was preparing to act, but it was disciplined, controlled, measured. The man in 38F suddenly stood, ignoring the seatbelt sign. The movement was deliberate, precise. Alicia's eyes opened fully now. She calculated every step, every possible outcome. She could see the subtle flicker of hesitation in the man's posture. He was carrying sensitive information. He didn't intend harm directly to the passengers, but if his cargo fell into the wrong hands, catastrophe was inevitable. Robert Miller shifted subtly, positioning himself closer, ready to intervene if necessary. His years in law enforcement had taught him to read situations in fragments, and he sensed Alicia was the only one capable of fully understanding the scale of the threat. Alicia allowed the moment to stretch, forcing herself to maintain the appearance of casual observation. She quietly ran through possibilities. What if the man was compromised? What if someone else was coordinating from the outside? She had to neutralize the threat without causing panic. The balance between control and chaos was delicate. The man began muttering under his breath, words in a language Alicia recognized as Eastern European, though his tone suggested desperation rather than anger. She leaned subtly, observing without revealing her knowledge. His tablet screen flickered. He was entering codes, but she could sense the subtle sabotage already embedded. Someone had anticipated this. Jennifer saw the tension in the aisle increase. Families shifted in their seats, sensing the unspoken unease. The Brooks family, though unaware of the full scale, mirrored the fear of the cabin. Kate Reynolds exhaled slowly, trying to calm herself as she watched Alicia. There was something commanding, almost supernatural, in the quiet intensity the woman radiated. Suddenly, the plane shuddered violently, more than mere turbulence could account for. Drinks spilled onto trays, the lights flickered, and a low hum pulsed through the fuselage. Harris and Peterson exchanged worried glances. Alicia's eyes snapped to the cockpit instruments. Someone was testing the aircraft itself, probing its limits. The man in 38F froze, realization dawning. His hands clutched the tablet tighter, knuckles white. Alicia allowed herself a single subtle motion, a tiny shift in her posture, signaling awareness without confrontation. The man looked up briefly, their eyes meeting. Recognition was not in her face, but in the disciplined calm she exuded. He hesitated, caught between action and inaction. Alicia's internal voice ran calculations faster than any outside observer could comprehend. If she acted now, it had to be measured, surgical, a minimal disruption to the cabin while neutralizing the threat. She shifted slightly forward, maintaining eye contact with the man, a silent communication she understood. She was in control, and there was only one way forward. Jennifer, sensing Alicia's subtle cue, moved closer to discreetly monitor the passenger. Robert Miller adjusted his position, ready to intervene physically if required. The plane's subtle shudder continued, a rhythmic reminder that every second counted and every action had consequences. The man's gaze flicked from the cabin to the cockpit, back to Alicia. Sweat glistened faintly on his brow. He was in over his head. The codes he held were dangerous, potentially catastrophic if misused. Alicia knew this instantly. She let a faint sigh escape her lips, barely perceptible, a humanizing gesture. It was a quiet signal she was not an enemy. The first confrontation was complete without a single word spoken aloud. The tension hung in the cabin like a tangible force, stretching the nerves of every passenger. Alicia's presence alone had created a buffer between panic and control, between disaster and safety. The plane steadied, though the subtle external threat remained. Harris and Peterson adjusted the controls, attempting to mask the influence of the unseen observer. Alicia's mind raced ahead, anticipating the next move, preparing for escalation, silently commanding the room with authority invisible to all but the most observant. Passengers remained unaware of the full danger. Kate Reynolds held Ethan close, murmuring soothing words, while Jennifer Turner returned to her routine of checking seatbelts and monitoring behavior. Only Alicia, Robert, and the man in 38F fully understood the stakes. The shudder subsided momentarily. Alicia leaned back, still maintaining the guise of a passenger lost in thought, her hoodie pulled lightly over her hands. Her mind continued to race, evaluating probabilities, assessing risks, and preparing for the inevitable escalation. The cabin was calm, but the storm was only beginning. Alicia Carter's eyes swept over the cabin, noting each passenger's posture, each subtle reaction. Her mind raced through possible outcomes, contingency plans forming with the speed and precision of her fighter pilot years. The man in 38F remained frozen, clutching the tablet as though it were a lifeline, and Alicia knew in an instant the gravity of what he carried. Captain William Harris's voice came over the intercom again, steady but tinged with anxiety. Flight 739 turbulence persists. Please remain seated. Flight attendants, prepare for possible adjustments. The calm in his voice was a veneer, and Alicia could feel the tension radiating from the cockpit. Alan Peterson's hands danced over the controls, subtle adjustments masking the irregularities that Alicia could read immediately. Alicia allowed herself a faint exhale, barely perceptible, a humanizing signal. She leaned subtly toward 38F, drawing the man's attention without alerting the rest of the cabin. His fingers twitched over the tablet surface. He was attempting something, though Alicia could not yet discern what. She leaned closer, her voice low and firm. "I know what you're holding, and I know what's coming. If we don't act, people will die. You need to trust me." The man froze, eyes flicking briefly to the aisle, then back to her. Sweat dampened his brow, the tension in his jaw betraying the panic he tried to hide. He whispered something in his native language. Alicia understood the urgency without understanding every word. Time was slipping away. Robert Miller, observing from a few rows back, sensed the silent communication. He inched closer subtly, positioning himself to intervene if the situation escalated. Years in law enforcement had taught him to read the unsaid, and he recognized Alicia's posture and tone as the authority of someone used to command under pressure. The plane jolted again, sharper this time, and several passengers gasped. Drinks splashed, papers fluttered, and Kate Reynolds instinctively clutched her young son, Ethan Brooks, pressing him close. Sarah Brooks whispered calming words that sounded fragile against the growl of the engines. Alicia's gaze flicked to them, her mind cataloging who might need protection in the event of chaos. Alicia straightened slightly, projecting calm authority. "Listen to me," she said softly but with precision. I need you to start working on those codes. But don't let anyone notice. Make them look intact, but neutralize them. If they get through, all of us, everyone here, is at risk. The man hesitated, then nodded slowly, his fingers trembling as he followed her instruction. Alicia's pulse remained steady. Years of discipline, training under life or death conditions, allowed her to remain a calm center in a storm. Jennifer Turner, sensing the shift, discreetly monitored 38F. Her eyes met Alicia's briefly, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The cabin remained outwardly composed, but the tension crackled like static electricity. Every passenger was oblivious to the fact that their survival depended on the precise, silent collaboration of a handful of individuals. The plane jolted again, but this time, the source was external. Alicia caught the faint glimmer of lights outside the port window. Another aircraft, not a commercial plane, its movements precise, predatory. Harris and Peterson's subtle maneuvers indicated recognition of a threat beyond normal air traffic. Alicia's jaw tightened, calculations already running. The man in 38F stiffened, murmuring under his breath. Alicia leaned forward slightly, eyes locking with his. "This is it," she whispered. "They're here. You do your part. I'll handle the rest." His eyes widened, and a flicker of trust passed through them. Suddenly, the aircraft shuddered violently. The cabin lights flickered, drinks toppled. Overhead compartments rattled, sending a small cascade of items clattering to the floor. Passengers screamed or gasped instinctively. The plane was being tested, pushed to its limits. Alicia's heart remained steady. She recognized the pattern of aggression. Someone was challenging them, probing their limits. Captain Harris's voice rose slightly over the intercom. "Flight 739, brace for adjustments. Flight attendants, secure positions." The calm was a mask. The reality of the threat pressed against every fiber of Alicia's awareness. Alicia moved deliberately through the aisle, her presence commanding attention without panic. She addressed the man again quietly, ensuring he continued neutralizing the codes. Robert Miller mirrored her movements, quietly positioning himself to intervene if necessary. Jennifer Turner kept the rest of the cabin reassured, her practiced calm a buffer for the chaos surrounding them. The external aircraft closed slightly. Lights flashed along the fuselage of the unidentified plane. A warning, a threat. Alicia's mind raced. If they attempted a direct breach, she needed to have a maneuver ready, something that could destabilize the adversary without endangering the passengers. She leaned toward the cockpit door, her voice calm but urgent. "William? Alan, I need to make subtle course adjustments. Slight, controlled. They're testing us, trying to force our hand. Keep it smooth. No sudden moves, but buy me seconds." Harris's grip tightened on the yoke, a silent acknowledgement. Peterson's fingers adjusted controls with care. Alicia returned to 38F, observing the man. His hands moved more confidently now, guided by her instructions. Sweat still beaded his forehead, but he was following her lead. The silent collaboration between them was delicate but precise. Suddenly, the plane shuddered again, and the external aircraft shifted, revealing a sleek, modified jet trailing closely. Its maneuvers were aggressive but controlled. Alicia recognized the pattern of former military pilot, highly skilled, testing their response to see weaknesses. She turned slightly, projecting authority across the aisle. "Stay calm. No sudden moves. Everything depends on composure. Follow my instructions." The passengers sensed a change in the cabin's energy. Even without understanding the specifics, the aura of control from Alicia provided a strange comfort amidst chaos. The man in 38F continued his work. Alicia's eyes scanned the cabin, noting who might need guidance, who might panic, who could be protected. Every detail mattered. She was simultaneously pilot, strategist, and guardian. The external jet maintained position, circling slightly. Its pilot was skilled, aggressive, but predictable under pressure. Alicia had to anticipate every move, stay 2 steps ahead. She leaned slightly toward 38F again, whispering instructions that would protect not only the tablet, but everyone aboard Flight 739. Alicia's presence, measured authority, and strategic mind created a fragile equilibrium. Passengers remained largely unaware of the true stakes, but every subtle maneuver, every whispered instruction, was orchestrating a defense of their lives. The shudders subsided slightly. The immediate threat paused. Alicia allowed herself a brief internal acknowledgement. They had stabilized the situation for now, but she knew this was only the beginning. The next move would demand more courage, more precision, more control. The dim glow of the cabin lights reflected off the polished surfaces of Flight 739's interior as Alicia Carter surveyed the scene again. The calm exterior of the passengers belied the chaos outside. She could see it through the narrow windows, a silhouette of a sleek jet tracing their path like a predator following its prey. Her instincts honed over years of fighter piloting kicked into overdrive. This was no ordinary interception. Captain William Harris's voice echoed over the intercom, calm but taut. Flight 739, maintain your current heading. All passengers remain seated with belts fastened. Flight attendants, remain secure. Alicia noted the subtle tension in his voice, the way his knuckles whitened around the yoke. His experience was unquestionable, but even he was reading the situation as unpredictable. Alan Peterson's eyes flicked between instruments and the external radar, signaling faint alarm. Alicia leaned slightly, her gaze narrowing, and whispered, "They're matching every move we make. This is a professional trained to counter civilian maneuvers. We need to create a tactical advantage." The man in 38F, Victor, gripped the tablet tighter, now moving with a fragile rhythm, attempting to neutralize the satellite codes under Alicia's guidance. Sweat formed on his temples, yet his focus sharpened with every instruction she gave. Alicia's presence was magnetic, calm, commanding an anchor in the storm. Suddenly, the plane shuddered violently, more intense than previous jostles. Passengers gasped, some gripping armrests, some staring in terror out the windows. Kate Reynolds whispered soothing words to her son, Ethan, who clung to her with wide, frightened eyes. Alicia observed them, noting every subtle response, aware that panic was a virus she had to contain. Outside the starboard window, the hostile aircraft had shifted closer. Its lights glinted ominously, a warning or perhaps a test. Alicia's mind raced, calculating trajectories, velocities, and possible outcomes. Every second counted, every adjustment mattered. She leaned toward Victor, voice low but firm. Keep working on the codes. Make them appear intact but inoperative. If they succeed, everything collapses. You're the linchpin. Victor's hands shook slightly but obeyed, following her precise guidance. Robert Miller, seated discreetly behind, observed and subtly adjusted his position. His law enforcement experience told him that Alicia's calm authority was more than natural leadership. It was a strategic presence, designed to orchestrate survival under extreme conditions. Jennifer Turner, moving silently among the passengers, reassured them with practiced gestures, her eyes flicking to Alicia for subtle cues. The cabin maintained an outward calm, but Alicia knew the pressure outside could fracture the illusion at any moment. The jet on the outside adjusted position again, closer now, a menacing presence shadowing their movements with uncanny precision. Alicia noticed something, a slight hesitation in its turn. The pilot's pattern was aggressive but almost imperceptibly predictable. Alicia's lips pressed into a thin line. She recognized the cadence from her training day's probe, push, strike, repeated in cycles. She rose slightly from her aisle position, projecting authority across the cabin without alarming the passengers. "Everyone stay calm," she said softly, her voice carrying effortlessly. "Do exactly as instructed. This is for your safety. Trust the crew and follow my lead." The passengers obeyed, some instinctively sensing that her calm demeanor masked something critical. Alicia moved to the cockpit door, signaling subtly to Captain Harris. "William, slight adjustments now. Offset course 5 degrees starboard, gradual and controlled. Alan, reduce speed by 10 knots gradually. This is to buy time, to mislead them into overcommitting." Harris's eyes flicked to hers, then back to the controls. "Understood." Peterson adjusted with precision, their trust in Alicia implicit. Victor continued working, decrypting, corrupting, and neutralizing segments of the codes. Alicia's instructions were meticulous, ensuring he remained focused while the external threat pressed closer. The plane shuddered slightly with each adjustment, subtle enough to appear as normal turbulence to the passengers, but Alicia calculated every G-force, every aerodynamic ripple. Suddenly, a warning light blinked on the instrument panel hydraulic fluctuations. The external jet's proximity had triggered minor stress on the control surfaces. Harris's voice rose slightly. "Tight. Flight 739 minor systems alert. Stay calm." Alicia's eyes narrowed. This was the opening she needed. Victor, almost there. "Keep going. Seconds matter," she murmured. Her hands moved subtly, adjusting her posture to influence Harris through visual cues, signaling exact timing for the next maneuver. She could feel the rhythm of the aircraft, each vibration, each pressure shift under her feet. Outside, the hostile aircraft began a tighter turn, its aggressive pattern now exposed. Alicia analyzed, heart steady, pulse controlled. She whispered to herself, time for a tactical shift. Harris and Peterson trusted her implicitly, following her nuanced cues. Alicia's mind raced initiate speed brake maneuver, deploy the gear slowly to create drag, simulate system difficulty, force the hostile pilot to overcompensate. She moved with precision, stepping toward the cockpit, signaling readiness, then returning to Victor to oversee his progress. Victor's fingers flew over the tablet. Sweat streamed down his face. Alicia's presence was a stabilizing force, guiding him without distraction, keeping the operation covert yet precise. The external jet reacted sharply, overcompensating for the drag change, its movements less refined than before. Alicia allowed herself a faint, controlled smile. The plan was working. The cabin remained outwardly calm, though the tension was palpable. Kate Reynolds whispered to Ethan, "Everything's fine, honey," her words carrying reassurance, though Alicia knew that fear lingered beneath. Alicia glanced at the twins in row 24, their eyes wide, yet still following the instructions of their parents, shielded by the subtle authority she radiated. Another jolt, sharper than anticipated, caused drinks to spill and overhead compartments to rattle. Alicia's voice rose subtly, authoritative but measured. "Remain seated. Brace for adjustments. We are safe. Follow instructions exactly." The hostile aircraft began to stabilize, now reacting predictably. Alicia's assessment was immediate. "William, Alan, keep the plane steady. Slight left tilt, controlled descent. Maintain cabin pressure. External jet will anticipate, but we're ready. Victor, 5 more segments. Almost done." Time seemed suspended, each second elongated, each breath critical. The passengers remained unaware of the precision war being waged around them. Alicia's mind worked in multiple layers: human safety, tactical engagement, digital neutralization, and predictive modeling of the enemy pilot's reactions. Victor finished the final segments of code corruption. Alicia gave a subtle nod of acknowledgement, his relief almost visible. "Done," he whispered. Alicia's eyes met his, a silent affirmation of success. But she knew the external threat had not yet receded. The hostile jet pulled back slightly, testing distance and aggression. Alicia allowed herself a controlled exhale. The first tactical maneuver had succeeded, forcing the enemy to overcorrect and revealing a window for future moves. She could almost hear the rhythm of the aircraft, the subtle vibrations signaling that they were momentarily ahead. Her gaze swept over the cabin once more, noting subtle relief, cautious trust, and silent fear in equal measure. She remained a calm center in chaos, a lighthouse for the passengers' nerves. Her voice, quiet and steady, carried reassurance, authority, and direction simultaneously. Alicia Carter had turned the tide temporarily, but she knew this was only the beginning. Outside, the predatory jet loomed, waiting, testing, watching. Inside, Victor prepared the tablet for final confirmation. The next move would require perfect timing, precision, and unwavering calm. The tension in the cabin had reached an almost tangible density. Flight 739 moved through the upper clouds, sunlight glinting faintly off its polished fuselage, but outside, the hostile jet was a looming shadow, circling like a shark closing in. Alicia Carter remained seated for the briefest moment, scanning every passenger's face for signs of distress. She saw quiet fear, but also trust, a trust she could not betray. Every decision from this point on would determine life or death. Captain William Harris spoke over the intercom, his voice measured but tighter than usual. Flight 739, prepare for minor turbulence. We are adjusting course to manage weather conditions. But Alicia knew this was more than turbulence. The external pilot was deliberately testing them. She leaned toward the cockpit door, catching Harris's eye. Her gaze was calm but unyielding, a silent command for trust and cooperation. Alan Peterson, sensing the tension, adjusted the yoke slightly according to Alicia's subtle signals. Every movement was choreographed, precise. Alicia whispered to Victor, 5 more minutes and we take control. Make sure all external interference is neutralized. This is it. Victor nodded, his hands flying over the tablet, eyes glued to the code sequences. The hostile jet, piloted by Marcus Webb, made a sharp maneuver, aligning perfectly with Flight 739's path. The outside aircraft's shadow stretched along the fuselage, sunlight catching its sleek contours. The passengers, unaware of the deadly precision outside, felt only a mild jolt, which they attributed to air currents. Alicia's eyes never left the instrument panel, noting every tremor, every flicker of the radar. She could anticipate Webb's intentions because she had flown maneuvers like these in simulations countless times. Her mind was racing in parallel threads, maintaining passenger safety, managing internal tension, coordinating with Victor, and predicting Webb's next move. She rose slightly from her seat, projecting calm authority across the cabin. "Everyone, please remain seated and calm," she said softly, her voice imbued with a quiet power. "Trust us. You are safe. Follow instructions exactly." Her presence was magnetic. Even the anxious passengers felt a momentary reassurance. Outside, Marcus Webb increased pressure, attempting to force Flight 739 into a reactive position. Alicia's instincts screamed strategy. She whispered under her breath, recalling fighter tactics. She instructed Captain Harris through subtle signals. "Adjust 2 degrees starboard. Decrease speed gradually. Make them think we are vulnerable." Peterson executed with precision, the plane responding like a living entity under Alicia's direction. Victor glanced at Alicia, sweat dripping from his temple. "I'm almost done. Just a few more sequences to manipulate." Alicia nodded subtly, her eyes locked on the external radar. Every second mattered. Every fraction of a degree could make the difference between control and disaster. The cabin shuddered once more, slightly stronger than before. Kate Reynolds instinctively gripped her son Ethan closer, whispering soothing words. Alicia noticed these small gestures and allowed herself a tiny, internal acknowledgement of human resilience. These moments of connection were why she fought not only to survive but to ensure the passengers did too. Outside, Webb's jet misjudged Flight 739's subtle maneuvers. Alicia had laid the trap perfectly. She whispered instructions to Harris and Peterson. Hold steady. Slight vertical adjustment. Let them overcommit. The hostile pilot reacted exactly as predicted, tipping his aircraft slightly off alignment. Alicia's heart rate remained steady. Her calm exterior masked the adrenaline surging through her veins. Victor completed the final sequences of code manipulation. Alicia's subtle nod to him was both relief and signal. Done. We're ready, she murmured. The hostile jet made another aggressive move, unaware that the digital systems it had relied upon were compromised. Alicia's tactical awareness gave Flight 739 a temporary upper hand, but she knew the confrontation was far from over. She stood fully now, moving with deliberate calm toward the aisle, projecting authority. Remain calm. We're in control, she told the passengers softly. Jennifer Turner, the lead flight attendant, echoed Alicia's assurance, moving among the rows to maintain outward calm. The cabin's atmosphere was tense, but stable, a testament to Alicia's leadership. Marcus Webb, realizing his maneuvers were being countered, increased aggression. Alicia anticipated the pattern, whispering to Harris, "Prepare for evasive sequence. Minimal altitude drop, slight banking. We have this." Harris executed flawlessly, trusting Alicia implicitly. Every passenger remained seated, unaware of the precision dance occurring mere feet above the clouds. The external jet attempted a final approach maneuver, testing their patience and control. Alicia signaled subtly to Victor to maintain code interference. Webb's instruments began to fail intermittently, creating disorientation. Alicia felt a surge of cautious optimism. The enemy's advantage was waning. The plane shuddered as Webb attempted a last aggressive maneuver. Alicia instructed Harris and Peterson in quick, precise signals, guiding the aircraft through a complex but controlled sequence. Outside, the hostile jet overextended, exposing its trajectory. Alicia's tactical awareness allowed Flight 739 to stabilize, temporarily forcing Webb into a defensive posture. In the cabin, the passengers remained calm, though small signs of fear persisted. Ethan whispered to his mother, sensing something significant yet incomprehensible. Kate Reynolds held him close, grateful for Alicia's composed guidance. Alicia moved among the passengers with quiet confidence, observing, assessing, reassuring. Her presence alone was a stabilizing force, with the external threat temporarily neutralized. Alicia allowed herself a brief mental pause. She knew the confrontation was not yet over, but recognized the success of the first full maneuver. Flight 739 now held the strategic advantage, and the passengers were unaware of how close they had come to catastrophe. Her eyes swept over the cabin, taking in the faces of those who depended on her calm authority. She felt the weight of responsibility, but also the quiet strength of her own resolve. Alicia Carter had taken control, not just of the aircraft, but of the fear, uncertainty, and potential chaos surrounding them. Her tactical brilliance, combined with human empathy, had created a moment of temporary security, a fragile but vital pause before the next move. The external jet maintained distance, testing, observing. Alicia knew the next engagement would require the same precision, the same unwavering calm. But for now, she had achieved control. She turned to Victor, her eyes softening slightly. "You did well. The next steps will be easier with this window." Victor exhaled, visibly relieved, though Alicia reminded herself that the real challenge was not yet complete. Alicia returned her attention to the passengers, projecting reassurance, empathy, and authority in equal measure. Flight 739, under her command, now moved through the skies with a controlled confidence, a temporary calm amidst the storm. She allowed herself a faint, private smile. The first confrontation had been met and managed, and for now, they had the upper hand. The hours of tense maneuvering had brought Flight 739 to a delicate balance. Outside, Marcus Webb's hostile jet circled like a predator testing prey, each movement precise and threatening. Inside, the passengers were calm, unaware of the peril just beyond the thin aluminum walls. Alicia Carter remained the fulcrum of control, her calm presence radiating authority and reassurance simultaneously. Alicia observed the external radar with sharp focus. She could anticipate Webb's next moves because she had studied his patterns meticulously in real time. Each maneuver of Flight 739 had been designed to mislead him, but now she knew a decisive action was required. She turned slightly to Captain William Harris and Alan Peterson, conveying instructions with subtle gestures. Prepare for vertical shift, then rapid lateral evasion. Timing is critical. Harris nodded, trusting Alicia implicitly. Victor Clough worked feverishly, manipulating the aircraft's external interface to disrupt the hostile jet's targeting systems. His fingers flew over the tablet with skill born from experience and desperation. Alicia glanced at him, her eyes calm but sharp. "Almost there," she whispered. Victor's hands shook slightly as he completed the final sequences, granting Flight 739 a tactical advantage. Outside, Marcus Webb attempted a complex approach, aiming to corner Flight 739. Alicia had anticipated this. She signaled Harris to execute a controlled bank to starboard while adjusting altitude by 1,200 feet. The aircraft responded like a living being under her guidance, smooth and precise despite the danger. Webb's jet, expecting an easy interception, overextended. The Predator was now slightly vulnerable. Inside the cabin, tension was palpable. Kate Reynolds clutched her briefcase tightly, whispering soothing words to her son, Ethan. Ethan, sensing the anxiety but not fully understanding, leaned into his mother's embrace. Robert Miller, the retired police officer, glanced toward the cockpit, reading the calm authority on Alicia's face and allowing himself a cautious sense of reassurance. The passengers were calm, but Alicia knew this could change in an instant if control faltered. Alicia rose slightly from her seat, moving toward the aisle with deliberate grace, projecting calm authority to the entire cabin. "Everyone, please remain seated. Trust us. We have control," she said softly. Jennifer Turner, the lead flight attendant, echoed Alicia's words, moving among the rows to maintain outward calm. Every movement, every word, was part of Alicia's larger orchestration. Marcus Webb, realizing his maneuvers were being countered, increased the aggression. Alicia's mind worked several steps ahead. She whispered instructions to Harris and Peterson. Prepare for evasive sequence. Minimal altitude drop, slight banking. Timing is everything. Harris executed flawlessly, adjusting the aircraft in fractions of degrees, each movement critical. Peterson maintained auxiliary controls, ensuring every system responded perfectly to Alicia's commands. Victor confirmed with a nod that the external systems were disrupted. Alicia allowed herself a momentary smile. This gave Flight 739 the upper hand, but only temporarily. Webb would adjust, and Alicia needed a decisive move to end the immediate threat. She leaned closer to Harris, giving precise, silent gestures. "Now," she whispered. The aircraft banked sharply, creating a sudden shift in trajectory. The outside jet overcommitted in response. Webb's instruments, partially compromised by Victor's interference, gave inaccurate readings. Alicia's strategy unfolded perfectly. The hostile jet was momentarily destabilized. The tension inside the cockpit was mirrored by the adrenaline coursing through Alicia's veins. She remained outwardly calm, projecting authority and reassurance even as her mind calculated every potential outcome. In the cabin, a subtle vibration passed through the fuselage as the aircraft shifted. Kate Reynolds instinctively grabbed Ethan closer, whispering comforting words. Alicia's voice carried softly. "We're in control. Everything will be fine. Follow instructions exactly." Her presence alone was a stabilizing force, keeping passengers calm and composed. Outside, Webb's jet corrected its course, but revealed a small opening. Alicia recognized it immediately. She signaled Harris' final maneuver: "Maintain altitude, execute slight lateral drift, hold until I confirm." Harris responded with complete trust. Aligning Flight 739 for a decisive sequence. The aircraft moved with the precision of a machine, every adjustment controlled by Alicia's calm yet authoritative commands. Victor completed the last set of sequences on his tablet, his hands trembling slightly. Alicia gave him a subtle nod. "Done," she whispered. The hostile jet's instruments faltered completely, leaving Webb temporarily blind to Flight 739's movements. Alicia's tactical mastery had turned the tables. The predator was now caught in a carefully laid trap. Alicia rose fully, moving to the center aisle. Her eyes swept across the cabin, noting small gestures of fear, trust, and resilience among the passengers. Each person, from Kate Reynolds to Robert Miller to young Ethan, relied on her composed presence. She spoke softly. "We've neutralized the immediate threat. Continue to remain seated and calm. You are safe." Her words carried weight because they were backed by the unmistakable authority of competence and calm. Outside, Webb attempted one last aggressive maneuver, miscalculating due to disrupted instruments. Alicia, anticipating this, instructed Harris and Peterson to execute a subtle vertical and lateral adjustment. The hostile jet overshot, losing alignment and forcing Webb into a reactive position. Alicia's careful orchestration had succeeded. Flight 739 had gained control over the dangerous confrontation. In the cockpit, a brief silence followed. Victor exhaled, relieved but still alert. Harris and Peterson maintained focus, knowing the engagement was not fully over. Alicia allowed herself a private, fleeting smile, recognizing the tactical victory. She turned to the passengers once more, projecting reassurance and calm authority. "You are safe. We've regained control. Trust in us for the rest of the flight." A palpable sense of relief spread through the cabin. Kate Reynolds whispered a quiet thank you to Alicia, who simply nodded, her calm presence radiating assurance. Robert Miller allowed himself a small exhale, recognizing the competence and quiet strength of the woman guiding them through danger. Even young Ethan, sensing safety in the calm authority, relaxed slightly in his mother's embrace. Alicia Carter had transformed Flight 739 from a vulnerable target into a controlled and tactically managed aircraft. She had confronted danger directly, maintained authority, and reassured those around her. Her calm, decisive actions and strategic mastery had neutralized a threat that could have been catastrophic. For the moment, Flight 739 moved through the skies with a renewed sense of stability, all under Alicia's unwavering guidance. The cabin of Flight 739 seemed calm now, yet Alicia Carter knew better. The danger from Marcus Webb's jet had been temporarily neutralized, but the real challenge had only just begun. Her mind raced, calculating multiple scenarios while maintaining the calm exterior that passengers relied upon. As she reviewed the readings, an unexpected alert flashed on the navigation panel. A second unidentified aircraft appeared on radar, approaching at high speed from the west. Alicia's heart remained steady, but a ripple of concern ran through her mind. This was no ordinary threat. The plane was moving with military precision, and its trajectory suggested it was intercepting Flight 739 deliberately. Captain William Harris leaned forward, noticing Alicia's focus. Another jet. That's impossible. We haven't filed any flight plans in that corridor. Alicia gave a measured nod. I know, but it's coming, and it's fast. This is not just a coincidence. Captain, it's a calculated move. She turned slightly to Alan Peterson. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. But hold off, I need to think this through. Victor Clove, who had been quiet since their earlier maneuver, glanced at Alicia. It's another pilot, isn't it? Someone trained. Alicia didn't reply immediately. Her mind worked furiously. They couldn't engage like before. Too many variables, too many innocent lives on board. She needed a strategy that would neutralize the threat without causing panic or endangering passengers. In the cabin, Kate Reynolds sensed tension. She whispered to her son Ethan, "Stay calm, sweetie. Everything's fine." Ethan clutched his mother's hand, eyes wide but trusting. Robert Miller, observant and analytical, scanned Alicia's expression. He could sense the inner storm, even if the outward calm remained intact. Alicia's thoughts drifted for a moment to the ethical dilemma before her. She could take a high-risk maneuver to potentially neutralize the threat immediately, but that could endanger passengers. Or she could attempt communication, which might fail entirely. Her training as a fighter pilot provided the tactical advantage, but her role as a CEO, as a responsible leader for human lives, demanded caution and ethical judgment. She breathed deeply, centering herself. Captain Harris, keep the plane steady. Alan, run defensive patterns, but avoid aggressive maneuvers unless necessary. She leaned closer to Victor. I need those systems to create a temporary blind spot. We have one shot at this, and we need precision. Victor nodded, fingers flying across his tablet. Alicia felt the pressure, but remained outwardly serene. Every second mattered. She could feel the second jet closing in, its movements precise and unyielding. Marcus Webb might have been a formidable opponent, but this new threat was unknown, an unpredictable variable. Suddenly, the intercom crackled, and a voice, calm yet authoritative, spoke in clear English. Flight 739. This is Lieutenant Daniel Hayes. I am on your frequency. Identify yourselves immediately. Alicia exchanged a brief glance with Harris. Lieutenant Hayes, we are Flight 739 civilian passengers on a domestic route. We have encountered hostile activity from another aircraft. Requesting instructions. There was a pause. Then the voice responded. Understood. I am aware of the hostile pilot. I am here to assist. You will need to execute my instructions precisely to avoid engagement. Are you capable? Alicia's eyes narrowed slightly. This was a relief, but also a new challenge. Following instructions was essential, yet they required flawless execution. One mistake could cost lives. She inhaled deeply and replied, "We are capable. Please, guide us." The instructions were precise, a series of coordinated movements designed to confuse the hostile jet, force it into a non-aggressive approach, and buy time. Alicia relayed the instructions to Harris and Peterson. The aircraft responded with incredible precision, following Alicia's calm, authoritative commands. As they executed the maneuvers, Alicia noticed subtle patterns in the hostile jet's responses. She realized something critical: the pilot was not acting alone. There was coordination intelligence behind the aggression. Alicia's mind raced through options. She could continue following instructions and buy more time, or she could take a calculated risk to end the threat directly. She felt a moral weight pressing on her chest. This decision could change everything. On one hand, immediate action could neutralize the threat. On the other, it could put passengers in danger. Her entire life had trained her for split-second tactical decisions. Yet the ethical dimension added a layer of complexity that few ever faced. Alicia allowed herself a brief internal reflection. Her experiences as a CEO, as a leader of people from diverse backgrounds, had taught her one thing: the value of life outweighs all tactical advantages. Her decision became clear. She would not risk passengers. She would rely on strategy, not force, to navigate this peril. With renewed determination, she issued clear instructions. Captain Harris, maintain altitude. Allen, adjust course subtly but precisely. Victor, continue interference patterns. We can win without confrontation. The next moments were tense beyond measure. Outside, the hostile jet attempted to intercept aggressively, but Alicia's orchestration was flawless. Every evasive maneuver, every electronic disruption, every calculated adjustment created a web that forced the enemy into a reactive position. Inside the cabin, passengers remained calm, unaware of the deadly chess game unfolding. Kate whispered reassurance to Ethan, while Robert Miller observed Alicia with growing admiration. The air was thick with suspense, yet the outward calm masked the intense concentration and ethical resolve guiding every movement. Finally, the second jet broke off from the aggressive approach. Lieutenant Hayes confirmed their success, and the hostile jet retreated beyond radar range. Alicia allowed herself a small exhale, feeling both relief and the weight of responsibility she carried. The cabin remained quiet, but the passengers' trust in her had deepened. Alicia's calm, decisive, and ethically grounded leadership had navigated them through a perilous encounter without unnecessary risk. Her strategic brilliance, combined with moral clarity, had preserved lives and maintained integrity. As she returned to her seat, Alicia reflected on the decisions she had made. The adrenaline began to ebb, leaving a sense of quiet triumph. She had faced a moral and tactical crucible and emerged with both the passengers safe and her ethical compass intact. The plane settled into a steady glide after the tense maneuvers. Outside, the sky was a deep, tranquil blue, untouched by the chaos that had moments ago threatened Flight 739. Inside the cabin, the passengers were beginning to relax, though the weight of the invisible danger still lingered in their collective consciousness. Alicia Carter allowed herself a moment to breathe deeply, feeling the tension gradually release from her shoulders. Captain William Harris leaned back in his seat, exhaling slowly. Alicia, I don't think I've ever seen anyone handle a situation like that with such composure. You've saved all of us. His voice carried genuine admiration, but Alicia's response was a modest nod. It wasn't just me, she said softly. It was the coordination, the trust, and knowing we had to make every decision count. She glanced toward Alan Peterson, who offered a small, appreciative smile. There was a mutual understanding between them, a bond forged in the intensity of survival. Robert Miller, sitting near the window, couldn't contain himself any longer. I have to say, Alicia, that was incredible. I mean, I've seen action in my time as a police officer, but what you just did, that was something else. Alicia's calm gaze met his, and a subtle smile crossed her face. Thank you, she replied, but this was about keeping people safe. That's always the priority. Her tone carried humility. Yet there was an undeniable strength beneath the surface, a quiet power, born from experience and inner resolve. In the cabin, the younger passengers were slowly processing the events. Ethan Brooks clutched his mother's hand, his wide eyes still reflecting traces of fear. Kate Reynolds whispered softly to him, "You're okay now." "Ethan, see, the plane is calm. Everything's fine." Alicia noticed their interaction and felt a wave of relief. These were the moments that defined her not just as a former fighter pilot, but as someone who deeply valued human life. As the initial tension faded, the conversation among passengers grew more reflective. Some shared their own stories of fear and courage, while others simply listened. Alicia allowed herself to be present without dominating the dialogue, knowing that her silence and steady presence provided reassurance. She found herself reflecting on the unusual chain of events. Marcus Webb's attack had been personal, deliberate, and calculated. But the intervention of Lieutenant Daniel Hayes, a stranger with precise knowledge and authority, reminded her of the complex interplay between human ambition and ethical responsibility. Each choice, each action, rippled far beyond the individual. The calm allowed her mind to wander to thoughts she often kept private, the battles fought not in the sky, but in the boardrooms, where decisions carried moral weight just as heavy as life and death choices. Alicia Carter had faced prejudice, skepticism, and systemic obstacles throughout her career. Yet, today, those lessons had shaped her ability to act decisively without compromising ethics or compassion. Captain Harris cleared his throat, breaking the reflective silence. We should think about landing procedures. The passengers will want to debrief, and I imagine news outlets will be buzzing with questions. Alicia nodded, appreciating his foresight. Let's maintain calm, make sure everyone is informed gradually, and keep transparency in mind, she advised. Her words, measured and reassuring, seemed to settle the cabin further. Alan Peterson spoke up, his voice quieter than usual. Alicia, can I ask, how did you stay so composed? Most people would have panicked. Alicia considered this, her gaze drifting briefly to the clouds outside the window. I think it comes from experience. Alan, you learn to separate fear from action. Fear is natural, but letting it dictate your decisions is a luxury we can't afford. The passengers absorbed her explanation with a mix of awe and relief. There was a rare authenticity in Alicia's words, an unspoken acknowledgement of human vulnerability coupled with extraordinary strength. She allowed herself a small, private smile. Moments like these, where courage and empathy intersected, were why she continued to embrace challenges despite the risks. As the plane descended toward the airport, Alicia noticed subtle gestures of gratitude from passengers, nods, small smiles, whispered words of thanks. Even the crew, who had witnessed her tactical brilliance, offered glances of respect. These acknowledgments, though quiet, affirmed the weight of her leadership. Kate Reynolds approached Alicia as the seatbelt signs flickered on. I can't imagine how terrifying it must have been up here, she said softly. But you handled it beautifully. I just wanted to say thank you. Alicia nodded, her gaze warm yet reflective. It was important to stay calm for everyone's sake. That's the best way to honor the trust people put in you. The plane touched down smoothly, and the relief among passengers was palpable. The cabin buzzed with subdued excitement and heartfelt conversations. Alicia allowed herself to lean back briefly, appreciating the moment of normalcy after the intense ordeal. She could feel the exhaustion settling in, but it was tempered by the profound satisfaction of knowing every life on board was safe. Once the plane was docked and the passengers began disembarking, Alicia lingered, observing the small acts of humanity around her. She noticed Ethan hugging his mother tightly, Kate exchanging a grateful handshake with a flight attendant, and Robert Miller quietly applauding Alicia's leadership. Each gesture reinforced the truth she had carried throughout her life. Courage and compassion were inseparable. As Alicia stepped off the plane, she felt the weight of the day's events shift to a sense of quiet accomplishment. She had navigated not only tactical threats, but ethical complexities that demanded both precision and empathy. The sky outside was calm, but the resonance of the moment lingered deeply within her. In a private moment, Alicia allowed herself a rare reflection on the intertwining of fate, skill, and human responsibility. She understood that life's challenges were never singular. They were a tapestry of decisions, each with consequences that extended far beyond the immediate moment. And in that understanding, she found clarity and resolve. As the terminal doors opened, sunlight poured onto the tarmac. Alicia Carter, once again, carried herself with the quiet strength and dignity that had guided her throughout life. She had faced fear, ethical dilemmas, and the unknown, yet emerged with integrity intact and lives preserved. Her journey, though fraught with peril, reaffirmed the human capacity for courage, empathy, and thoughtful action. The news of Flight 739's dramatic incident had spread rapidly by the time Alicia Carter reached her office the next morning. Television anchors, online news portals, and social media feeds were flooded with headlines praising the bravery and composure of a black woman who had remained calm under life-threatening circumstances. Alicia adjusted her glasses, scrolling through messages of admiration, concern, and curiosity. She felt a mixture of pride and humility, knowing that the attention, while flattering, was only a reflection of the collective efforts of everyone on board. Her assistant, Marissa Coleman, knocked softly before entering. "Alicia, your schedule is filling up fast. News outlets, interviews, even some nonprofits want statements from you," Marissa said, placing a tablet on her desk. Alicia looked at the device, noting the sheer volume of messages. "I know, Marissa, but I need to respond thoughtfully, not reactively," she said. Her voice carried calm determination. She had always believed in measured responses, in letting actions speak louder than sensational headlines. The media frenzy offered a complex mix of admiration and scrutiny. Some commentators lauded her courage, emphasizing the rarity of such poise in the face of danger. Others questioned why a commercial airline could have been endangered so dramatically, implicitly pointing towards systemic failures. Alicia understood the dual narrative well. Life often presented victories wrapped in criticism, and how one navigated the aftermath was as important as the event itself. Later that day, she attended a televised interview. The host, a seasoned journalist named Derek Stanton, introduced her with an energy that balanced respect and intrigue. Alicia Carter, a former fighter pilot and current CEO, saved Flight 739 from a potential disaster. "How did you manage to stay so composed?" Derek asked. Alicia smiled faintly, maintaining a posture that radiated both confidence and empathy. "I think it's about preparation and clarity," she replied. "In situations where lives are at stake, panic is a luxury we cannot afford. We must rely on our training, our instincts, and our ability to make decisions under pressure. But it's also about empathy, understanding that every choice affects real people, families, and futures." Her words resonated with viewers, not because they were grandiose, but because they were authentic and deeply human. Social media responses poured in, ranging from messages of personal reflection to broader discussions about representation. Alicia noticed countless young women expressing newfound confidence, inspired by her actions. There were debates about racial bias, corporate responsibility, and aviation safety. Alicia didn't shy away from these conversations. Instead, she engaged thoughtfully, offering perspectives rooted in experience without entering unnecessary conflict. Meanwhile, her company's board of directors reached out to commend her. While the professional acknowledgement was gratifying, Alicia knew that leadership extended beyond accolades. It was about setting an example, guiding ethically, and showing that courage was not only about visible heroism, but also about consistency in integrity. Alicia took a quiet moment in her office, reflecting on the sequence of events. She thought of Marcus Webb, the rogue pilot whose reckless actions had threatened so many. She considered the role of Lieutenant Daniel Hayes, whose timely intervention had saved lives. She recognized that human behavior was complex, often defined by unseen motivations, biases, and pressures, and in understanding that complexity, she saw the importance of empathy as a guiding force. Her thoughts shifted to the broader societal implications. Flight 739 had become more than a news story. It was a mirror reflecting societal attitudes about race, gender, and leadership. Alicia knew that her visibility now offered an opportunity to challenge stereotypes and expand understanding. Through her calm and decisive actions, she had demonstrated that leadership and courage transcended superficial labels. A call came from a young woman named Jasmine Thompson, a rising entrepreneur inspired by Alicia's story. Ms. Carter, your story has changed how I view challenges in my own business. I've faced doubt and dismissal for being young and black, but seeing your composure has given me strength, Jasmine said. Alicia felt a profound sense of connection. Thank you, Jasmine. Remember, courage doesn't always roar, it often whispers in the moments where you choose to act despite fear. Keep believing in your vision, and the world will notice your integrity. The evening brought a quiet reflection. Alicia sat by the window in her apartment, watching the city lights shimmer against the dark horizon. The adrenaline of the previous day had subsided, leaving a profound sense of responsibility. Her actions had saved lives, but they had also sparked conversations about equity, resilience, and ethical leadership. She understood that her influence extended beyond personal accolades. It was about inspiring a shift in perception, encouraging empathy, and affirming the potential for courage in everyone. Alicia thought back to the small but meaningful moments on Flight 739, the gratitude in Ethan's eyes, the reassuring nods from the crew, the silent respect from passengers who had once been strangers. Those moments held more significance than the headlines or interviews. They were the human connections that validated her choices and reminded her of the value of calm, considered action in the face of fear. Late into the night, she drafted a personal statement for her company's internal newsletter. She emphasized lessons in preparation, empathy, and ethical leadership, sharing insights from both her aviation and corporate experiences. Her words carried a gentle authority, encouraging employees to approach challenges with courage, integrity, and a sense of collective responsibility. Alicia knew that true influence came not from fame, but from guiding others to discover their own potential. In her private journal, she wrote about the paradox of visibility, the simultaneous exposure and vulnerability that came with public recognition. Yet, she found strength in knowing that her journey, with all its obstacles and triumphs, could offer others a framework for navigating fear, prejudice, and ethical dilemmas. The reflections reinforced her belief that courage was not simply an individual trait, but a communal force that grew when shared and nurtured. By the next morning, Alicia was scheduled to speak at a leadership forum. Her keynote would address resilience, ethical decision-making, and the power of calm under pressure. She felt a quiet anticipation, a readiness to translate personal experience into actionable insight for a wider audience. She understood that while the incident on Flight 739 would remain a defining moment, its true impact would be measured by how it inspired others to act with integrity and courage. As she prepared, Alicia thought about the journey of Flight 739, the fear, the split-second decisions, and the triumphs of collective courage. She reflected on how those intense moments had crystallized principles she had long lived by: empathy, preparation, integrity, and humility. and she recognized that the story, while extraordinary, was ultimately about ordinary human choices amplified by awareness and purpose. Stepping onto the stage at the forum, Alicia felt the weight of expectation, but also the clarity of purpose. She spoke with measured passion, drawing from her experiences to illustrate how courage, ethics, and empathy could guide not only leaders, but all individuals navigating complex circumstances. The audience, diverse in age and background, listened intently, many nodding as if seeing fragments of their own lives reflected in her words. Her speech concluded with a simple, profound message. Life often places us in moments that test our resolve. How we respond defines not only our character, but the impact we leave on others. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it, guided by empathy and integrity. Applause filled the room, not just for the story of Flight 739, but for the depth of reflection, authenticity, and wisdom she shared. In the days following her speech at the Leadership Forum, Alicia Carter found herself in moments of quiet reflection more often than she had anticipated. The whirlwind of media appearances, interviews, and social engagements had begun to settle, leaving a calm that allowed her to revisit the experiences on Flight 739 with clarity and perspective. She had saved lives, inspired countless people, and sparked vital conversations about courage, race, and leadership, but she knew that the true measure of impact was not in applause or recognition. Alicia began her morning routine, as she always did, with a cup of black coffee and a notebook on her desk. She wrote slowly, capturing thoughts, insights, and feelings. Writing was a way for her to untangle the complexities of her emotions, to transform anxiety into reflection and understanding. She recalled the split-second decisions that had defined Flight 739's journey, the precise moment when she recognized the jet's trajectory, the calm she maintained while the captain assessed the situation, and the instinctual coordination with Lieutenant Daniel Hayes to neutralize the threat. It had been chaos in the air, yet composed logic on the ground. The city outside her window pulsed with ordinary life children waiting for school buses, commuters hurrying to offices, and the rhythmic hum of city streets. Alicia's mind wandered to the passengers who had placed their lives in her hands. Ethan Brooks, the 12-year-old boy whose wide-eyed curiosity had become courage in motion. Sarah Brooks, whose quiet fear had mirrored the protective instincts of every parent. Kate Reynolds, the businesswoman who had silently observed Alicia and the crew with both skepticism and awe. She realized that the real stories extended beyond the headlines. They were etched in the faces of ordinary people whose faith and trust had intersected with extraordinary courage. In the afternoon, Alicia met with her team to discuss ongoing initiatives inspired by the incident. She emphasized that leadership and courage were not limited to moments of crisis. They were daily practices, manifested in empathy, accountability, and ethical choices. Her staff listened intently, many visibly moved by her reflections. She shared practical strategies fostering open communication, preparing for unexpected challenges, and nurturing a culture where every individual felt empowered to act decisively when needed. Alicia's message resonated because it was rooted in experience rather than theory. Despite the professional and public engagement, Alicia valued personal healing above all. She scheduled time to visit Lieutenant Daniel Hayes and the other crew members. Together, they revisited the sequence of events on Flight 739, not to relive trauma, but to process and integrate it. For Alicia, this process was crucial. Courage without reflection could easily become arrogance. Heroism without humility could be isolating. By sharing these moments with those who had participated in the ordeal, she found a sense of closure and mutual respect that deepened her understanding of human resilience. Evenings were reserved for solitude. Alicia sat in her apartment, watching the city lights shimmer against the dark horizon. The experience on Flight 739 had left an indelible mark on her, a reminder of both human fragility and the potential for extraordinary action. She reflected on her own growth, the calm that had guided her, the empathy that had connected her to strangers, and the ethical framework that had informed her choices. These reflections became a source of quiet strength, reinforcing the values she had long upheld in her personal and professional life. One evening, she received a message from Jasmine Thompson, the young entrepreneur she had encouraged weeks earlier. Jasmine shared that her own company had just navigated a critical challenge successfully, citing Alicia's guidance and the story of Flight 739 as a source of inspiration. Alicia smiled, feeling the profound ripple effect of her actions. Courage, she realized, was not a solitary force. It multiplied when shared, when witnessed, and when internalized by others. Each individual who drew strength from her experience extended its impact far beyond the confines of a single flight. Alicia also spent time reflecting on societal implications. The incident had prompted discussions about race, gender, and leadership. Alicia recognized that these conversations were far from over. Her visibility, while initially daunting, offered an opportunity to influence public discourse positively. She engaged thoughtfully in interviews and panel discussions, emphasizing that true leadership involved creating space for diverse voices, challenging biases, and modeling integrity. Her approach was deliberate and measured, reflecting both her personal philosophy and her desire to inspire long-term change. During a quiet walk in the park, Alicia pondered the paradox of courage and vulnerability. She remembered moments on Flight 739 when fear had been palpable, yet action was necessary. She considered the invisible battles people faced: daily microaggressions, systemic inequities, personal doubts, and realized that courage was as much about small, consistent acts as it was about extraordinary heroism. It was about showing up authentically, acting ethically, and connecting empathetically with others. In the following weeks, Alicia began mentoring a small group of aspiring leaders, many of whom were women of color navigating complex professional landscapes. She shared her experiences candidly, the triumphs, the fears, and the moments of doubt. Her guidance was practical, encouraging mentees to cultivate both skill and moral clarity. Alicia emphasized that leadership was a living practice, honed through reflection, feedback, and courage in action. Alicia also reconnected with her family. She visited her younger sister, Tasha, and recounted the events of Flight 739, focusing on lessons rather than spectacle. Tasha listened with wide-eyed admiration, asking questions about decision-making under pressure and ethical dilemmas. Alicia felt a profound sense of fulfillment in sharing wisdom across generations, knowing that her experiences could shape not only professional futures, but personal values as well. As the weeks turned into months, Flight 739 became more than a historical event. It transformed into a story of resilience, integrity, and human connection. Alicia recognized that the real legacy of that flight was not the headlines or social media recognition, but the lessons carried forward by each person who witnessed or learned from it. She felt a deep sense of responsibility to continue modeling courage, empathy, and ethical leadership in all aspects of her life. On a quiet Sunday morning, Alicia reflected on the entire journey from preparation to crisis, from public recognition to personal healing. She acknowledged her fear, celebrated her composure, and appreciated the interconnectedness of every action and decision. She realized that courage was not the absence of doubt, but the conscious choice to act ethically, compassionately, and decisively despite it. The experience had deepened her understanding of herself and others, reinforcing her belief that leadership was both a privilege and a moral obligation. In closing, Alicia prepared a personal note to share with her network of mentees, colleagues, and followers. She wrote, "Life presents moments that test our resolve, our integrity, and our empathy. How we respond defines not only our character, but the impact we leave on others. Remember, courage is a practice, a conscious choice, and an act of connection. Act with clarity, compassion, and conviction, and you will inspire change far beyond what you can see." Alicia Carter sat back, feeling a profound sense of peace. Flight 739 had challenged her, transformed her, and ultimately reaffirmed the values she had lived by her entire life. She knew the journey of reflection, healing, and growth would continue. But she also understood that in every act of courage, empathy, and integrity, there was the power to change lives, sometimes in ways that would ripple far beyond imagination. The story of Flight 739, though extraordinary, was ultimately about the ordinary strength within each person willing to face fear, act decisively, and uphold humanity in its most challenging moments. Alicia Carter's story offers more than a tale of heroism. It is a reflection on courage, empathy, and integrity in everyday life. The first lesson is that true strength often appears in unexpected moments, when ordinary people are asked to make extraordinary choices. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it, and it is grounded in moral clarity and self-belief. Another important message is the power of empathy. Alicia's attentiveness to others' fears, doubts, and needs allows her to connect deeply and act decisively. This reminds us that leadership is not about authority or recognition, but about uplifting and protecting others, even when it demands personal sacrifice. Finally, the story underscores resilience and reflection. Life's challenges, whether public crises or private struggles, offer opportunities for growth, learning, and transformation. By embracing courage, nurturing empathy, and reflecting on our choices, we can navigate adversity with dignity and inspire positive change around us. These lessons are universal, relevant at any age, and especially meaningful for those seeking to lead, guide, or make a difference in the world. Thank you for watching and sharing this journey with us. If Alicia's story inspired you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of courage and resilience. Your support helps us continue bringing these life-changing stories to the world.